So I'm finally talking about Vegapunk, the other mysterious character in One Piece. There's so much to talk about. The two main topics that I want to get to are 1, what is Vegapunk's goal? And 2, is he powerful? Does he have any powers? I think I want to start with the Vegapunk power theory first. So the first thing is, what do we know about Vegapunk? The scientists behind the SSG and the pacifistas, he is able to create artificial devil fruits that I'm guessing don't have side effects like Caesar's smiles. I'm guessing this because Vegapunk considered his Kaido copied fruit to be a failure, but so far there's been no real defects besides the appearance of the fruits. Whereas Caesar's fruits look very different, and a handful of them cause uncontrollable laughter as a side effect. But we don't really know if more of Vegapunk's devil fruits had the same effect. He also recreated Kizaru's lasers in the pacifistas, so he can recreate devil fruits and their powers. He has learned unique ways to use Sea Stone, and not to mention the Lineage Factors research with the Mads team that includes Vince Smoke Judge and Queen. In a lot of ways, Vegapunk has created many problems for the Straw Hats without ever even appearing. That is the power of his knowledge. We learn more about him when Frankie gets bounced to his homeland, where we find out he's been a genius since birth pretty much. And he wanted to help the people of the land survive the harsh, cold climate. It seems like Vegapunk had many more plans in store, but lacked the funding, which is why he probably partners with the world government because they apparently have no lack of funds. A major question I have is what makes Vegapunk less of a threat than Ohara? Like, Vegapunk has been poised to be the highest level of genius in One Piece, yet Ohara was eradicated for being smart and seeking out the language to decipher the poneglyphs. Well, if Vegapunk is so smart and has the freedom it sounds like he does, then if he doesn't already know the secret of the poneglyphs, then it feels like he could easily find out. So either Vegapunk is allowed to know, and there's some kind of difference between Ohara and Vegapunk that allows him to live, or maybe Vegapunk is somehow restricted from learning the knowledge. Vegapunk could also be geniusly hiding his knowledge, and it's being overlooked with his successful creations. This juxtaposition between the two entities makes Vegapunk's character so interesting. We know a little bit of his backstory on Karakuri Island, and specifically future country Baltimore. In the story there, it seems like the grandfather there personally knew Vegapunk as a child, and the tremendous scientific feats completed by Vegapunk, including creating a cyborg animal workforce, which interestingly ties to Wano, but also to create a geothermal power plant that heats up the entire country. From this story, it seems like Vegapunk is a benevolent inventor working for the benefit of humanity, which contradicts his role with the world government. Someone as smart as him has to see that his contributions are creating an overwhelmingly oppressive force. So is Vegapunk actually an evil mastermind, or is he someone good that's working on a way more important project that he is able to overlook the power-ups he is providing to the oppressive world government? Okay, after going over some of the things that we know about Vegapunk, it feels like it'd be helpful if there was some kind of clue about what kind of power he has. So let's look at one of the creations that has been overshadowing the entire timeskip story, and has appeared periodically in the pre-timeskip story, and that's his various artificial devil fruit endeavors. Starting with Momonosuke's fish fruit that was created by copying Kaido's lineage factor. This fruit was created by Vegapunk and deemed a failure and left on Punk Hazard. So far though, there's been no indication of this fruit being a failure. So far Momo has been able to copy all of Kaido's abilities, and though there have been some hiccups at the beginning, that's probably because Momo was a kid and had to learn how to control it. Similar to how Luffy had to learn how to equip his body properly with the rubber fruit. So if the fruit is fully functional, why is it a failure? But better yet, how did Vegapunk know the fruit was a failure before anyone even ate it? For the smiles, the production for the fruit resulted in only 10% success rate. Then of the 10% of the fruits that were a success, 10% of those were the ones that were actual Zoan smile fruits. Which all of this means that Caesar and the rest of the evil drug distribution group had no way of knowing that a fruit was a failure until they tested it on someone. Those people were called pleasures, and then evil Orochi decided to give those partially eaten fruits to the townspeople in Wano to make them more compliant with his cruel leadership. The overall point is that Vegapunk had some method of understanding his artificial fruit was a failure, but others 1 couldn't recreate his fruit, and 2 couldn't tell it was a failure until after it was tested. And on top of that, Vegapunk's standard for failure is way higher than everyone else's. So how did he know it was a failure? Well, the first notable difference is that a real devil fruit has the squiggly design, kind of like Sanji's eyebrows, whereas the artificial devil fruits instead have this circle target design. Given how smart Vegapunk is though, I doubt he would base his failure purely on aesthetics. So then what was he basing it off of? This is where a major theory starts, and it kind of alludes to my origin theories. What if Vegapunk has the voice of all things? I think this makes a lot of sense, especially if you consider voice of all things as an extension of observation haki. I think Vegapunk probably has an insane observation haki and possibly an advanced future sight. So what if Vegapunk has enough future sight that he's able to go through several inventions and test it using future sight, which would mean that he wouldn't really need to test it. He could just sense the future outcomes and understand a failure at that point. This would make sense for the artificial devil fruit situation, and to be honest, that power would be godsend for a prolific inventor like Vegapunk. He may not have innate combat power, but if you tied knowledge and that kind of future sight, he would be an actual menace for anyone, really. Like, I'm talking Lelouch 50-step prediction kind of menace. The other part of it, I think, is the voice of all things. A lot of Vegapunk's creations made me think he has the voice of all things. Like, what if that's how he knew the devil fruit was defective? He can hear the voices of the devil fruits, which supposedly have actual devils inside. Which I just want to add, I think devil fruits were given a name based on propaganda, probably to make them less appealing. Similar to how the world government labeled O'Hara residents as evil demons trying to destroy the world with the ancient weapons. It's just targeted propaganda. But anyways, what if Vegapunk could hear the devils inside the fruit and even communicate with it? And because his new fruit didn't have a voice in it, it was deemed a failure because of that. We still don't know much about the voice of all things nor devil fruits, but given the fact that we know a few voice of all things users, but none of them have mentioned devil fruits speaking to them, makes me think that if Vegapunk had the voice of all things, he wouldn't just be your normal voice of all things user. He may be from the elusive, mysterious three-eyed tribe. When awakened, they supposedly unlock the voice of all things, and probably more powers due to the fact that we have very little information about them. It doesn't make sense for there not to be more hidden secrets. This is where some of the proposed extensions of observation haki and the voice of all things, or creations, comes into play. I want to make a separate video for the three-eyed tribe, but just extrapolating some things based on Vegapunk here. There's some kind of ability that Vegapunk has that allows him to sense and understand the powers of nature. The first example was discovering how Sea Stone is able to achieve its various effects by imitating the energy of the sea, on top of manipulating devil fruits which probably hold their own energies. He was also able to recreate the devil fruit power of the light fruit, which could just be tech, but could also be related to his understanding of the natural elements. If you remember my 4th haki video, I hypothesized that to be able to command the elements, you'd have to have an intimate understanding of the elements to control the power. For most people, it wouldn't be possible, but Vegapunk, who is supposedly 500 years ahead of his time, probably understands all the elements to a terrifying degree. He probably knows other powers and their potentials better than the actual devil fruit users themselves. If he were to have something like an atom fruit, he'd be god mode for sure. Or if you were to have a super versatile fruit like the rubber fruit, he'd probably know all the possible uses for it. Getting that out of the way, something more concrete about Vegapunk's ability that supports an advanced level of voice of all things was the fact that he was able to figure out how to get an inanimate object to eat a devil fruit. When you think of what we learned more recently about how devil fruits are able to change lineage factors of the consumer, how does that make any sense for an inanimate object? This is a concept that was used more in the pre-time skip and probably will reappear soon. We see two primary examples of this with a sword and a gun. Funkfried is a sword that ate an elephant fruit, and Lasso is a gun that ate a dog fruit. Interestingly, both ate Zoan fruits, which makes me wonder if an inanimate object can eat a Paramecia or Logia fruit. This makes me think that there's some kind of soul element to this process where Vegapunk has to find compatible objects to then have it eat compatible devil fruits. And the process is much easier with a Zoan fruit than with any other type of fruit. And going back to the original idea of why Momo's fish fruit was a failure, it might be because Vegapunk originally wanted to create Zoan fruits to then mass produce Zoan weapons, but because he could not hear a soul or a devil within the fruit, it was deemed a failure. This quote, failure, is something I want to discuss in a future video about either Momonosuke or devil fruit's origin, so I'll save that for later. The other way this process can work, where Vegapunk is able to get an inanimate object to eat the fruit, is the reverse logic where the object has to have a strong enough soul. We know that certain objects can speak, specifically the poneglyphs. How they're able to convey a message we're unsure of still, but I imagine it's through some advanced levels of conquerors, observation, and armament, like a combination of the three, which I'll get into in the origin theory video. But a more concrete example is an object seems to gain a soul after it's surrounded by extreme emotions. Example, the Going Merry. Rest in peace, Mary. The Going Merry is an example of an object that superseded what we traditionally know to be the voice of all things. When the crew is off at Ennie's lobby, Iceberg went to the scrapyard and found the Going Merry washed up on the shore. And despite Iceberg never previously displaying the power to hear the voice of all things, Going Merry spoke to him. That is some insane soul power to be able to communicate with even a stranger. Because of this, Iceberg was compelled to fix the ship and launch it into the ocean. And then the Merry even said thank you as it set off on its last journey to save the crew against all the odds. It steered itself all the way through the storm to Ennie's lobby, told the crew to jump into the ocean so she could catch them, and sailed them back to safety. Rereading this chapter honestly made me tear up. After they ran the tearjerker memory montage, the Merry Spirit had the audacity to say, "I'm sorry, I wanted to carry you even further." Like, Merry, stop, you did enough. Not just Luffy heard the Merry say this, everyone there, even the crew and the shipwrights heard the voice. Then Luffy apologized and the Merry said despite all the chaos it had been through, the Merry was still happy and that it loved being a part of their adventure. The Merry felt so much happiness throughout all the memories that it was able to manifest an actual spirit that was able to communicate with people and assert its own will. So in a way, it kind of sounds like Merry had haki. which kind of makes sense that Mary would need observation Haki to do the things it did. So this is another reason why I think Voice of All Things is a kind of fourth Haki used by objects, like it's full circle. Either the object is imbued with Haki like poneglyphs probably, or uses Haki some of the time like Zunisha or Mary. So going back to the main point about Vegapunk, he can probably see these spirits with his proposed third eye, and is able to get them to eat or accept the respective devil fruits. Following this logic, that means that technically the Going Merry could probably have eaten a devil fruit. As for what Vegapunk's specific technology is that allows inanimate objects to eat devil fruits, I'm not really sure. It might be some kind of energy converter that allows devil fruits to be converted into a spirit form and eaten by the respective object spirit. This is also relevant to the current Straw Hats for a lot of reasons. Frankie built the Thousand Sunny to maintain the soul of the Going Merry. There was a non-canon showing of the Merry spirit on the Thousand Sunny. I'm going to put out an unpopular opinion, but in One Piece, the non-manga content in the anime or movies sometimes feel like a foreshadow game where they hide important foreshadowing in it. But going back, so maybe the Thousand Sunny will be able to eat a devil fruit. That would be insane. And another example of an object that is imbued with Haki and has been shown to have a personality are the black or cursed swords. Right now, specifically Enma. Enma might be an object that ends up having the tangible spirit that could eventually consume a devil fruit. It's funny because in an SBS, Oda jokingly personified Zoro's swords, and this is what he drew. But this is how I imagine cursed swords are. They contain very passionate souls that are able to subtly communicate to their users. You can see this when Zoro talks to Enma, telling him to give back his energy. So coming back to Vegapunk, I think his powers are rooted in knowledge. He is able to attain knowledge that no one else is able to attain. When you think of Roger and his crew, they were able to attain the knowledge of the world and similar enlightenment from reading the poneglyphs. Vegapunk having the third eye can probably reach a similar enlightenment through a different method. Another key research point for Vegapunks though is the lineage factor or bloodline element, which has been referenced throughout the time skip. The concept of lineage factor is basically genetic codes, which when you think about it is basically encoded memory. I think another aspect of the three-eyed tribe power is being able to access memories of objects or people, which would make it a lot easier for Vegapunk to get a deeper insight on the lineage factor, which puts him above the other scientists involved with their lineage factor related projects. Caesar wasn't able to replicate Vegapunk's devil fruit, probably due to the various mentioned shortcomings Caesar has in understanding devil fruits that Vegapunk might have over him, like being able to possibly hear the spirit of the devil fruits. And Judge with his poor lineage factor rationalization, I think Judge failed with his children's lineage factors because in order to have a will, you have to have emotions. The Going Merry felt happy and was able to manifest its spirit. Luffy and Roger didn't ignore death, they were able to smile through it, which is difficult but powerful. I think Judge's experiments made it so his kids are unable to have Haki, which Vegapunk would have understood to be backwards logic probably. I will make a video in the future about the Vinsmokes because I think they're an interesting example of a lot of powerful concepts in One Piece. But okay, so now circling back, what is Vegapunk's true intentions if this is what he might be capable of? We have to learn about the position of the three-eyed tribe. Are they eradicated, protected, in hiding? With all his knowledge and power, I'm surprised the world government allows him to live. He has to be restricted somehow. Does his knowledge plague him from wanting to make a difference? And is he just living his life out like a Mortis? It doesn't really feel like that though. Feels like Vegapunk can empower the Straw Hats a lot if given the opportunity to do so. And then, who is he connected to? He seemed to be close to Kuma, and man, do I want to learn about Kuma. He's so cool. Thank you guys for watching. I'm trying to expand my content out, so make sure to follow or subscribe on the other social media outlets. I have more to talk about with Vegapunk. Mainly I want to talk more about the lineage factor and Chopper. That power up video needed this one first a little bit, but it's exciting. I also want to talk more about Enma and the swords and various weapons. The Devil Fruit origin theory is going to be a lot of fun and maybe a slight teaser, but when I think of objects that have been through a lot and have probably have the most exposure to Haki and various wills, there's only one object I can think of. We can talk about that at another time. I just wanted to add some interesting things I noticed. It feels like each Yonko has benefited from Vegapunk and has some sort of obscure relationship to him. I don't know about you guys, but how is Big Mom such a prolific birther? Are her kids in vitro? Like she steals people's lineage factors and has kids with that? Seems like Vegapunk might be related there. And then there's Kaido. Vegapunk used Kaido's lineage factor for his research. Queen worked with Vegapunk. And the last part that is somewhat odd is Kaido's surveillance team. They have some weird clairvoyant power and consists of cyborg animals, which seems to be a signature of Vegapunk rather than Queen. But I have another video on that. This was my longest video so far, and it could have been much longer. It's crazy how Oda managed to make a character that has literally zero screen time, but over the last 20 plus years has had an effect on the macro events of the entire series, and I think has played a role or has been mentioned in almost every single arc, directly or indirectly. It wouldn't be an understatement to say that Vegapunk is a character I'm anxiously waiting for.